Welcome, El. I'm glad you're here today.
Yeah.
You know we're here to talk about your transness, right?
Yeah, I know.
Before we begin, I'd like to start with a prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for bringing El here today. He is so lost and so confused, but by being here, I know he's going to be on the right path. I know with your justice and your mercy, you will cast out this wicked behavior from him. I know that he wants to do the right thing, so please help me guide him in the right direction. And we ask all of this in Jesus' name, amen. Before we begin, I've got a few questions that I'd like to ask you. First of all, what makes you think that you can steal womanhood from real women like us, like me?
No.
What makes you think you can just decide to be a woman one day and you will just magically be a woman?
No.
Do you not know about biology? Do you not know how things work? That is such a male thing to do, to steal womanhood from real women. You know there's women out there that are never going to get the opportunities that you've gotten. The fact that you think you can just do this, you should be ashamed of yourself. You should be ashamed. I am going to pray for you every day until you come back to the light. I know God will have mercy on your soul if you choose to walk in righteousness and to throw out this sin of being trans. I'm going to take a small detour from the 7 deadly sins to talk about shame. Why? Shame is everywhere. You may not see it. It may not be easy to spot. And I'd argue that it's just as common as all of the other emotions like happiness and sadness and anger. You just need to know how to look for it. For today's case study, we're going to look at me. And before y'all say, I know Natalie beat me to this topic like 5 years ago, but that was an eternity ago, and I didn't recognize I had shame. I didn't know who Natalie was at the time, and I was honestly probably still arguing with my therapist that I wasn't actually depressed. The good old days. Some of us are late bloomers, and not all of us are made to be mothers. I think I'm probably the weird aunt, but let me let you in a little secret. There is no shortage of shame to go around. Look at this culture that we live in the United States. Look at what we shame. We have addiction. We shame the gays. We shame the wealthy. We shame poverty. We shame obesity. We shame anything that goes beyond what we see as normal by a cis-het Christian society. I mean, if I'm a straight man and I find men attractive, then I am bad. And it's not just the behavior, it's that if I cross society's line, I am rotten at the core. You remember the 7 deadly sins that I talked about? Well, if you haven't, check them out. But a lot of our societal shame is really just those 7 deadly sins rebranded. Gluttony is fat shaming. Pride is the fags. Sloth is just like the welfare queens that Republicans made up to demonize a minority group to get votes. Yeah, even shame is political. But today we're talking about my shame. I've gotten to know it pretty well. It's a feeling that made me sleep on the floor under my bed instead of on top of it. Shame coerced me to say a million prayers, hoping God would scrape the shit off the toilet bowl of my soul. And you know what? He never did. Maybe it was my fucking fault. I don't know. What I do know is I learned to hide the shame in the dark recesses of my mind. Whenever I felt like it, I either tried to outrun it or I threw it at somebody else. Yes, I threw it like a girl. Or do I? Am I feeling a little prideful today? Well, look at that asshole. He's obviously way worse. As far as I'm concerned, I've had shame since I could form sentences. Christianity and shame go hand in hand. Remember Adam and Eve, like the first story of the Bible? When they bit into that apple, they committed the first sin. And what was the result? It was shame. They weaved together some clothes out of plants, I guess, and were kicked out of their garden by their own father. He definitely didn't make them feel less ashamed. And if there's one thing that has stayed constant over the millennia in Christianity, it's shame. Today is not about the history of shame. There's a lot to tell there, but this video is about me. So I'm going to put some clothes on. Sorry to disappoint. And we're going to talk about my shame. I want to tell you a story. As you may have guessed, I was born male. That's right. I'm one of those transsexuals. Okay, yep, that's the video. That's all there is. Anyway, fortunately for you, we're gonna go a little bit deeper than that. We're gonna go back to teeny tiny baby me. My childhood home was a devout Christian one. You probably know the type. Go to church 2 times a week, know every VeggieTales song by heart, know all of the hymns, all the Bible verses, know Psalm 23, it's like the best. Anyway, our gender roles were very defined. Think Hardy Boys, these things. Well, and emotions, well, that's not a thing for guys, that's for girls. From the time that I was born, I was told
the truth of God regarding the doctrine of man, regarding what it means to be a man or a woman according to God. This is not subject to change, not subject to revision. It cannot be voted down. This is the will of Almighty
Anyway,
God.
The thing to know about me is that I am a bit of, an overachiever. I was the kind of bitch that was the last one leaving the gym after basketball practice, looking for extra credits. Even though I was homeschooled, so I guess that's not really applicable here. But if I was in school, I definitely would have been one of those kids. Maybe it's curiosity, maybe it's an attempt to fill a deep void somewhere. I don't know. Maybe I just want a little bit more love. I know. Go to therapy again. Got it. My overachieving years was not just in school. It was in almost everything. Why? 1, hell. 2, anxiety. 3, OCD. And 4, I don't know yet. We can get more into that later. When it came to gender, who would have thought? I was also an overachiever. Masculinity was something to be studied and won. If there was Andrew Tate back when I was a teenager, I would have been in the front row, sucking it all up. I wasn't okay. When I came out as trans, people in my life were shocked. They were like, what? You? No. There were no signs. Yeah. Not every trans person has a little flamboyant gay streak, okay? That doesn't make me any less of this. Surprise! But let's rewind this for a minute. Let's go back to 2002. Times were a little bit simpler. The internet was slowly dialing up, and I barely knew what a cell phone was, let alone had one. I was 12. I was being homeschooled by my Christian parents. By that age, I knew the Bible way better than I knew my own feelings. Not only that, I got to know politics a little bit as well. I got to listen to a lot of Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity. An absurd amount. No 12-year-old should have to listen to that much. I didn't have many friends, but that was okay because I was too busy being the perfect kid. I took care of my younger siblings. I didn't curse. I read the Bible every day. I journaled and prayed like there was no tomorrow. Or that, hell was a real place and that I thought I was definitely going to go there if I didn't pray more. I mean, we didn't have gold stars as a homeschooler, but God damn it, if I could have, I would have collected every single one. If we fast forward a couple of years, all that had changed. I looked in the mirror and I noticed things were different about me. The changes were subtle at first, but they were definitely there. It was the hair on random places on my body. My shoulders were getting wider, my skin was getting less soft, and even my voice was starting to drop. It was at that point I realized that everything was shifting in the wrong direction. I started to panic. Before then, I only loosely conceptualized my gender. I knew I was a boy because that's what everyone said I was. But I don't know that I ever felt like I was a boy. It was kind of like the doors were sliding shut, and I realized I was on the wrong train. And there it was. Shame. I still tried to be the perfect kid. I tried to do everything right. All of a sudden, my body started to fail me. I was given the birds and the bees talk from a Christian perspective, which is, don't. It was bad. I was told the difference between typical female and male development, and it wasn't just awkward for me, it was painful. I felt like I had opened the present for someone else's body. It was indescribable at the time, but I knew I couldn't ask for something different because I knew my parents would never understand. I felt like I was crazy. Actually, no. I thought my feelings were sinful. Like, I thought that how I felt was the work of the devil. The shame of my gender and what the world could see was creeping up inside me. It's like this garden weed that you don't really notice it's there until it starts killing all of your plants. What does a 13-year-old do with these feelings? In the world I grew up in, boys weren't supposed to have feelings at all, except for maybe anger. So what did I do? I started to bury them. At first, my attempts were like a 4-year-old playing the violin at a little recital. Everything was awkward and horribly painful. I started to look for every opportunity I could be alone at home so I could explore those feelings for myself. It's really hard when you have 4 younger siblings and a stay-at-home mom and you're all homeschooled. So those times were few and far between, but I still sought them out. And being homeschooled, I didn't have a separate place to escape to, like most kids when they go to school and they get out from under their parents' watch. Because of that, I also didn't have friends to talk about how I was feeling. And there were no teachers I could go with my questions, since I was afraid to ask my parents. It was just me, at my house, isolated in my own messed up body. And this brain just, I couldn't, it was horrible. And in those rare moments for myself, I would borrow my mom's clothes and sometimes even her makeup, and I would hide behind the closed doors of my bedroom. And for brief moments, everything felt right. Eventually, as I craved for connection, I would go to online chat rooms where I could hide the boy me behind a computer screen and let the girl in me be free. For brief moments, I could exist as the person I felt I was. These temporary moments of relief would all come crashing down. My biggest fear was that I would be caught, humiliated, punished, sent to hell. And just like that, the shame would creep back in. It became a very familiar cycle. I would get to escape for a few hours and then panic and freaked out that I would be discovered to be this crazy pervert. And I started mentally flogging myself about what I had done. I'd pray to God. I'd beg him to never let me do that again. And yet, as soon as the house was empty, a week or two later, I would just do it all over again. And there I was in my mom's dress, chatting to strangers on the internet, trying my best. But remember, I was an overachiever. I wanted more than anything to make my parents proud. I wanted to make God proud. I wanted all of those inner feelings, the hopes and the dreams, and I took them and I packed them real small. I got better at zipping closed my hopes and dreams and emotions into what felt like an overstuffed suitcase of my dirty soul. As the years passed, I got to the point where I forgot I had a suitcase in my closet at all. From an outsider's perspective, everything looked great. I was tall, I was athletic, I did pretty good in school. I started leaning into that masculinity, not just a little bit. Like, I went full send. To pay for college, I joined the army, and it was honestly all downhill from there. I let the rigidity of Christianity and the military consume my life. I had rules to follow and standards to exceed. And this is like who I was supposed to be, right? Like, this is what everyone said I was supposed to do, and I just did it. And so fast forward over my 20s, we'll hit my 20s another time. But I spent most of my time in school. For this part, I think I'm going to need just somebody's motorcycle I found. Wish I could ride. I could just give the whole talk like this. Okay. So, welcome to my 20s. Remember that suitcase I told you about? The one where I put everything that I thought was wrong with me? Well, it was very full. It had been zip tight for so long, it was starting to fall apart. My feelings as a teenager were coming back. After all, she had never left. I had left the church. I was no longer Christian. But shame had already taken root deep inside of me. There's some beliefs that are easier to take off than others. In my soul, I believed I was bad to the core. The discomfort I felt as a teenager was a fire that had long been smoldering, and it was just starting to set a blaze inside of me. In my head, I knew how I was supposed to be. I'm a people pleaser, and I wanted to meet the expectations of others. Some of that has not changed, but in here, in my heart, I knew who I was. That was super fucking scary. It also made me feel so much shame. I thought I was living peak masculinity. I thought I had climbed to the top of the mountain and was winning at life. I thought that my armor was impenetrable. If I couldn't live as a straight white man, wouldn't it just be better off to die? As the war raged on, the cycles of shame fired up again and again and again. In secret, I would allow my truest self to be free, but only behind closed doors. When shame came barging through, the self-hatred took over. I would purge everything that reminded me of what I had done, of everything that reminded me of the thoughts I had had. I would put up my hood and I would sprint in the opposite direction. Everything got worse. The hatred, the anger, all of that spiraled me into deep depression. I had been living this way for so long, I had not recognized how this despair had crept in and stolen my hope. I became preoccupied with death. Shame is like a parasite. For so long, it had grown and grown, eating me alive. It didn't matter whether I was Christian or not. Prayer, the Bible, the gym, running, books, travel. None of it could get rid of my shame. I would fly around the world, and yet no matter where I went, I could not escape my mind. I had spent so much time living with such frantic energy that working in the emergency room started to feel like a calm environment. At the very least, it was a distraction for my inner world. I longed for a different life, and it made me feel crazy. On paper, my life was nearly perfect. I was finishing my service in the military. I was engaged to a beautiful woman. I had job security. I was well respected. I even had a cute puppy. To those on the outside, my life seemed like I was coasting downhill. But for some reason, I felt like I was in the midst of a hurricane. I started to realize that something had to change. As I started to cross the boundaries of gender presentation, I want to tell you a little bit about when I first started stepping outside. You need to know how scary that was for me. And I'm sure how scary it is for a lot of trans people or anybody that sort of defies gender norms. I'm pretty tall, which means when I go out in public, I stand out. Early in my transition, I was browsing through the aisles of makeup at Target. I felt as if I was one step away from somebody announcing over the intercom, "There is a pervert on aisle 27. Pervert alert! Pervert alert on aisle 27. Please evacuate." Life had I to be so small, like Woodstock from Charlie Brown's Mall, just almost invisible. It was just that I felt like I was breaking the rules. I was now publicly showing the world that I was trans. There was really no hiding it. And with that, I felt like I was telling everyone in the world that there was something deeply wrong with me. That feeling, that was shame. On the one hand, I felt so fucked up because I couldn't see an escape from the life I had built. One of the few things that saved me was this deep curiosity. As I reached the dead end of what I felt like was life, I began to ask myself questions that I honestly had always kept off limits. Those questions started to crack the very foundation of my identity, and the man that I had built for so many years began to crumble. And it's true, putting on mascara for the first time as an adult, it didn't make me a woman. What it did do was force me to ask really difficult questions, like, what was it that made me a man? And could I give up my social status by publicly claiming my transness? During this time, I started to see a therapist. The cracks continued to grow. I kept asking questions, and my therapist asked me even more questions. I was revisiting an entire lifetime's worth of assumptions. For the first time in a long time, maybe ever, I started to feel something different. I started to feel hope. The thing about being a hyper-masculine white man, it was kind of like having a turtle shell that I could duck into anytime I felt afraid or threatened. Whatever shame that came back up could be smooshed back inside. There was no way I could have prepared for the journey of living full-time as trans, especially looking like me. For a while, I would obsess over the progress pictures of trans women on Reddit and saw some amazing glow-ups and wondered if that would ever be my experience. They looked incredible. And then there was my day-to-day. I did not feel cute. I did not feel beautiful. In fact, I felt uglier than ever before. And worse, I could not escape seeing the trans women targeted by places like Fox News. These were real trans people somewhere that were being verbally assaulted for just being trans. There was a time in my life before I came out that I would have laughed at those people too. I had so many years and years of disgust that were built up by the Joe Rogans and the Steven Crowders and the Dave Chappelles. All of that had been ingrained into me. Going out into the world as a trans woman, early in transition, just straight up sucked. I'm thinking back to my first few months on hormones. I was still struggling to hide my facial hair. For some reason, I would still walk into Sephora. Obviously, I would keep my head down. In those days, I struggled to understand the difference between concealer and foundation. There was absolutely no way I was going to color match correctly because I was terrified. I was not asking anybody for help. I should have, but I didn't. And despite that public feeling of shame and embarrassment and fear, there was something I started to feel in addition to hope, and that was a little bit of internal peace. Now I want to say here explicitly that much of my journey was mental and emotional. I'm hoping that I've made that clear by now. I bring up the physical appearance because that's what the world around me saw. Because my claiming of transness happened publicly, as it does for many, that part of my journey felt like the most shameful. As I had left Christianity behind, there's still the shame that I carried with me when I went out into public. My shame did not arise in feeling as if I were a trans woman. My shame arose when I claimed my transness in public. Those early days were not sexy at all. If someone at Sephora handed me a paper bag to put over my head when I walked in, I probably would have put it on. Our cishet society does not celebrate the man who feminizes himself in public. There's no statues to transsexuals on week 3 of their transition, at least none that I know of. I mean, there's barely statues of trans people at all. Allie likes to lick me, but now my arm is like soaked with drool for my dog. We'll power through. It'll be okay. The last major section, which are just more of my thoughts, because I want to talk about the shame that I see today. It is everywhere. We, as humans, look to the group for feedback about ourselves. I mean, we're social creatures, for better or for worse. And everyone, I mean everyone, craves acceptance and validation from somebody. Even going back to the times when I thought of myself as a rugged loner that didn't give a fuck, that's what I hoped people would see. I was still hoping that people saw this person that just didn't give a fuck. Cringe and sad. Whew. Feeling shame means feeling like you've fallen short of what you believe are the group's standards. Look around. Those standards are everywhere. Usually we don't even recognize them as standards. Just a couple of examples. I mean, if you're a woman who doesn't have children, there's going to be a lot of shame there. If you're a straight man, there's going to be a lot of shame if you wear something that might be a little bit gay, a little bit fruity. I mean, even if you're single for too long, people are going to start to ask questions. What's wrong with you? And that's shame. But that emotion of shame is felt internally. I know I didn't recognize it for a long time. One day, something clicked, and I felt like Scooby-Doo ripping off the mask of the villain who was living downstairs literally the entire time. I realized that shame were those feelings that I was too afraid to talk about with anyone because I thought that they were fucked up and I thought that made me fucked up. It was like this inner dialogue that never came out. When I think back to Christianity, Christianity takes shame to the next level. It's like you have this polar bear, right? This polar bear is shame. And then you give it a chainsaw and a cage match. That's oftentimes how Christianity is with shame. You weren't gonna win anyway, and now you're just gonna die faster. Or any of you out there say, but Elle, what about this religion or this belief system? Well, this is my trauma dump. Okay. Go make your own video about shame. But with Christianity, it takes this idea of a conscience. It gives it this unlimited power and a huge temper. I mean, think of the God of the Old Testament. It looms behind you everywhere you go. Not to mention, if you fuck up and you die, there's a fire pit full of Hitlers and Jeffrey Dahmers for you to join. Which, side note, I went on a whole Wikipedia deep dive about Jeffrey Dahmer when I was writing this, and apparently he was a born-again Christian. Sorry, I didn't watch the documentaries, but maybe you guys that are going to heaven will get to meet him, so no thank you. But the stakes of Christianity are so high, and his eyes are always watching. Under his eye.
Under his eye. Under his eye.
Don't forget, we also have this tiny little book called the Bible. Pretty cryptic, some beautiful writing in there. Like I've said before, no one agrees 100% on its interpretation. In many denominations, it's kind of like a horoscope for shame, except you get to blame all the bad parts on the devil. Can you imagine if... What is the Taurus in Christianity? Like, what's the equivalent? I barely know what a Taurus is on like a regular horoscope, so I guess I'm a bad gay. At the end of the day, the Bible is what sets the standards for your denomination. If you violate the standards, even for a moment, you should feel shame, because that is the sin nature. That's the badness that is always a part of you. It isn't just your action that are sinful, it is who you are. Think about that for a second. Like, that's you on like a very fundamental level. Here in the United States, our country's Christian history is full of shame. We aren't that far removed from the Puritans. I'm assuming that that is the denomination with the most shame, but I mean, Southern Baptists are up there as well, I guess. Sorry, guys. Well, let's fast forward to now. It's 2026. Christian nationalism is on the rise. Part of its power is that it is fueled by shame and billionaires. You want to know why I say that it is fueled by shame? Look who Christians are using as their sacrificial lambs. The pregnant out of wedlock, the drug addict, the gay, the trans, the illegal immigrant. Those are all the targets of some of the most strict legislation in this country. All of these people are who they deem worthy of pushing down. So you have this societal shame, and then it morphs into laws and legislation that are meant to punish the wicked and uphold the traditional family values. I swear, if I have to hear traditional family values for the rest of my life in America, I think maybe that's when I move to Canada. What I'm trying to say is that our culture refuses to bring out the shame into the light. And because of that, what we see is shame's dark shadows getting bigger and bigger. It's seeped out of the internet culture, but sometimes internet culture is just an extreme level of what's happening in society. Those anonymous incel subreddits talking about how no one will ever love them. Look at all these cults of personalities. People like Donald Trump, Andrew Tate, Joe Rogan, David Goggins. I wish it stopped there, but there's a lot of money in machismo culture, and there's a lot of shame there as well. And I want to point out that there is a big difference between masculinity and machismo. I think of masculinity kind of like, I don't know, a mustache. It's kind of masculine. Maybe. But machismo, on the other hand, the macho, the bigger for the sake of being bigger. It's the lifted up truck that you need to get a ladder into. Unless you got these legs, I'll just hop right on in. But look at how bro culture acts. Look at how they police each other. You gonna let that girl tell you what to do? You gonna wear that shirt? That's gay. Shame. You're gonna let that guy cut you off? Make you feel small, bitch? Are you sensitive? Are you gonna cry? You should feel shamed. Take your man card away. Our culture tells men that if they're small or not dominant, that they should feel ashamed. Far too often, the message is be bigger, be stronger, be faster, be more aggressive. Sounds kind of like capitalism. Personally, I believe that physical strength says nothing about your manhood. With our economic system that rewards a dog-eat-dog mentality, since men have controlled this economic system for ages, it should be no surprise that the message is eat or get eaten. There's so much financial insecurity out there. People struggle to pay rent or even retire, and definitely can't afford healthcare. It's no surprise that we have generations of men who struggle with the mere thought of vulnerability. Shame can be like a concrete brick tied to those who are already drowning. I know when I was struggling financially and as a man, the manosphere was very appealing. It gave me direction. It gave me this sort of camaraderie, even if I was going the wrong way. When I was like up to my eyeballs in the manosphere, I was always sizing up others. I needed to be at the top of the social hierarchy. I used to kneel at the cross of Joe Rogan. I used to scream like David Goggins. Something about a boat. I even used to idolize Elon Musk. That one I still feel a little bit of shame about. Can you blame me? I mean, in those days, I had no idea who I was. I barely knew how I felt, besides not feeling like I was enough. And I highlight these men not just because that they were people that I looked up to, but they represent what our culture values the most: physical fitness, rugged individualism, and financial success. Back when I was struggling, I didn't want connection with others. I wanted to win. Being raised the way I was, it's not like I learned how to connect with anybody anyway. Instead, I learned about God, and I knew that all I wanted to be was adored. I thought if I could live like Joe Rogan or Elon Musk did, that I would be able to get rid of my self-hatred. Maybe if others could love me, I could begin to love myself. But instead, the shame grew inside, and I just felt more and more lonely. When I was living in that world, there was no amount of achievement that could fill this hollowness inside me. Even though I held on to masculinity so incredibly tight, not only was I chasing a version of success I didn't actually want, I was afraid of anything that may hint that I was not manly or straight. Thinking back at how bad it was, when I was living in New York City, I was afraid to hold my girlfriend's purse because I thought other people might look at me and think I was one of the gays. Well, I've accumulated a purse or two. Don't ask me about my shoes. The point is not to dunk on you boys. Okay, no. Actually, it's not to dunk on you boys, but I've got a few things to say to some of you. So fuck it. This life that we're in together is hard. I know the stress that is placed on men is a lot, but it's time for a culture shift. Seriously, the stress is everywhere, and it's not exclusive to men. What is usually exclusive to men is a horrible, toxic form of masculinity that says you cannot feel it. You cannot feel your feelings. You cannot talk about it, and you better not cry about it. I've worked in the ER long enough to know resilience has nothing to do with the number of tears you shed or the number of balls you have. I've seen many bawl their eyes out and still do really hard things. So for any of you guys out there wanting to suppress your feelings because you think it makes you stronger, that's not what masculinity is. Sadness, humiliation, pain, or any other difficult feeling is not what has to end you. What will end you is the isolation and pushing down all those shameful feelings until you explode. So some of you out there need to get in your feelings, connect with one another, connect with all of us, because we're all here together. I'm tired of it. Okay. I'm almost off my soapbox now. I get that this may be a countercultural thing to say, but I'm trans and I've seen both sides now. Let's be real. The alternative is to keep the status quo, and that doesn't seem to be going well for a lot of you. Does it? Shame is everywhere in this American culture. Feeling rejection from the group by being an outlier really sucks. And again, that's why shame is so powerful, and that's why so many of us fall into line. Part of the reason I think so many are isolated, this loneliness epidemic, is because the walls that you are expected to keep up are so high. Don't even think about trying to breach them. We have told men that vulnerability is not masculine. So many have to protect their ego and lock shame up in the basement. And this is not exclusive to men. From an early age, the shame is imprinted and it follows you everywhere. You either fall into line or realize that there are other ways to live. It's getting late. It's time to wrap this shit up. I don't have a pretty bow or 12 steps for you to take to get rid of your shame. I'm just some random bitch on the internet. Don't listen to me at all. I am going to share what helped me. I wish I could say that after those first few years of transition, as I started to feel more comfortable with myself, that I never felt shame again. I kept going to therapy, but the truth is, I still feel shame sometimes. It crashes over me and tries to drown me, kind of like it always has tried to do. Shame still comes up in other areas. And that's normal. But these days, there's a small but important difference. I don't try to squash my shame. I just let it stay. When I can, I'll talk about it. I'll talk about it with friends. I'll write about it. I'll apparently make a YouTube video about it. So I'll try to explore the shame in all of its depths. And it has taken me to dark places. And maybe this is more me, but I kind of like the dark. But regardless, once I air this shame out a little bit and process it, it never stays. The one thing I know about shame is that it's like so many other emotions. I don't get to choose them. I can't even decide how long they'll stay with me. Whether it's for minutes, hours, days, weeks, months. I just feel them when they come, and I try to let them go when they're ready to leave. And so at the end of the day, when you peel back the layers of shame in your soul, what is it that you see? Is it badness? Or is it something else? Stop. You do not want to hear the Buddhist answer to my shame. I don't want to end with the Buddhist answer to my shame. Sorry. I know I said that shame is something that comes and goes, but you know what? I'm not ashamed of being trans anymore. Yes, shame may come up in other areas of my life, but not here. Not now. Once I addressed the shame, I found something I didn't expect. There was someone I could actually love. Me. When I opened that basement door where shame had kept me captive for so long, I set myself free, and I realized shame was merely the chains that kept my beauty captive. Gone was this feeling that I was a despisable member of society. When I found this new feeling, girl, there is no coming back from that. I was set on fire. For the first time in my life, I tilted my chin up because I loved who I was. It was no longer because I thought I had to build someone cool for this world. The glimmer in my eye was unmistakable. I started feeling this amazing feeling. It was pride, not in what I had done, but in who I was, who I fucking am. With that, I realized no one can take that away. Now, there's a lot of fucked up shit happening to trans people in the US right now. It is not a great place to be, especially if you're a kid. It really sucks. They're trying, and in some places they're succeeding in taking away our healthcare. This is true in public spaces as well, and in many other ways. They can try to humiliate us in the eyes of the American public. They can make us the scapegoat for all that ails society. But there is one thing I know for sure. They can never take away who we are. I could not be prouder to stand beside every single trans person that has the courage to look them in the eye and tell them, we aren't going anywhere.